No, you can't do that.
All right, everyone. I'd like to kick off the regularly scheduled July 21 Planning Commission meeting. First of all, may we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Cooper.
Present.
Commissioner Campbell. Commissioner Vadalos. Chair Brown.
Present.
Commissioner Gordon.
Here.
Commissioner Niblin.
Here.
Commissioner Evans.
Present.
Great. Commissioner Gordon, would you leave us in a salute to the flag, please?
Sure.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Now on to administrative business. I am afraid we do not have a quorum to approve the April 7th minutes. Is that correct?
These are the doomed minutes, apparently. So that's correct. We will hold it over again.
Great. I'm going to go a little, I'm going to just to continue with this. I'd like to also, well, why don't I back up? I missed the approval of the order of the agenda. Would any commissioner like to make a motion regarding the agenda for today?
Sure. I move that we approve the order of agenda.
And I'll second that.
Very well. I'll vote. And that passes, I guess, 6-0. Great. Next, let me continue with the approval of the prior period minutes. And we do have a quorum for the June 16 minutes. Would anybody like to make a motion?
Actually, I have a correction. On page 3, mid-page, it says Chair Evans, closed public comments, and it should be Chair Brown. And then I'll move to accept the minutes, unless there's other changes.
Any other changes? Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Niblin. Let's vote on that motion.
Commissioner Cooper will be abstaining since I was not here at the last meeting.
Didn't pick me up.
Well, the 4 who were here voted yes.
I voted yes as well. It's just not recording. I'm sorry. I obviously screwed something up.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so the prior minutes from June 16th are approved. Next, is there a designation of liaison to the City Council meeting?
There are no planning-related items on the next City Council agenda, so there is no need for a liaison.
Great. Again, everyone's encouraged to attend. As there are no consent items, I will move on to the public hearing. Use permit, site development permit, and variance filed by the applicant and owner, Michelle and David Garcia, to construct a one-story single-family dwelling of 4,000 square feet with an attached garage on a vacant lot of 8.6 acres at 650 Corona Drive, APN 022-210-080. Recommended CEQA status, exempt. Proposed action, approved as conditioned for use permit and site development permit. Recommend denial of variance. Is there a staff report?
Good evening to the Planning Commission. Proposed again is a one-story, single-family residence of approximately 4,000 square feet on a vacant 8.6 acre lot addressed as 650 Corona Drive. One issue I want to mention is, right off the bat, is there is a water pipeline through the location of where the house would be placed. So as part of this project, there is a condition of approval, number 2, I believe, that recommends that pipeline relocation and subsequent easement, again, it's with the North Coast County Water District that has that water pipeline, that be approved before the project goes forward. Obviously, you want to make sure you're putting your house in an area that doesn't have to block access to the water pipeline. And there is information from the North Coast County Water District that is part of the attachment, a letter from the North Coast County Water District that is one of the attachments in your packet tonight. Also, we sent out a courtesy notice. Several of the neighbors contacted me either via phone or coming in to the counter. Appeared to be some concerns having to do with motorcycles, noise, some other issues about access to get to different properties up in that area. And I understand that there are a couple of concerned neighbors here that will be speaking tonight. I do want to mention I have a letter from one of them, but she will be covering that tonight. Issues, again, concerning motorcycle noise and access to the property, but she'll explain further. The variance. There was a variance proposed. This project is zoned HPD. As part of the HPD requirement, you have to have 2 guest parking spaces in addition to the 2-car garage for the single-family residence. In this case, the applicant doesn't believe it's necessary to put in those 2 additional guest parking spaces. So the applicant has requested a variance as part of this project. Staff is recommending denial of this variance because we believe with that very long driveway that there is ample space to put in those 2 parking spaces. Another issue is maybe the fact that the safe parking down at the street is a couple hundred feet away. It makes sense to have guest parking up closer to the house. So those were some of the reasons why we were recommending denial of the variance. However, the applicant does provide justification as to why they believe the variance should be approved, and that also is one of your attachments in the packet tonight, and that is something that they'll be discussing further. Issue they're bringing up. I believe that covers everything, that the project does meet all the development standards other than, or with the denial of the variance to require those 2 guest parking spaces. Be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions from the commission at this point? Yes, is that Commissioner Gordon fast on the draw?
Thank you for that staff report. Question for you guys. So in terms of the requirement, the HPD requirement that there be 2 guest parking spaces, what is the rationale for that requirement?
I believe it's because it's in sensitive hillside areas, HP Hillside Preservation District, and to provide ample parking and if there's limited access or steep access or... So the hillside preservation does have this additional parking requirement, not only for single-family residential on this, but for any project that's developed, any multiple-family project that's developed in the hillside preservation district. And I go back to looking at this particular project, you do have quite a distance, in this particular case, quite a distance from where you could safely park on Corona Drive and then a walk up the driveway to where the dwelling is proposed.
Have you guys had conversations with the applicant about their objections?
Yes. Oh, yes, they're fully briefed and should be able to answer any of your questions and explain their rationale. Again, it's very steep. There would be retaining walls needed depending on where you're located and how high the retaining walls are. Although it is possible. I mean, if you look at the topo map and the way the driveway is laid out, it is possible. Actually, even up closer to the house, I believe that it's possible, although that might impact where that water line placement is. But what I'm trying to say is you can have those parking spaces parked parallel to the driveway so that you would have a wider driveway to allow for that, to accommodate that parking.
Okay.
That
Yes, that's helpful. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Cooper.
I have a question in regards to number 2, as far as the transmission line. It seems that the letter that's attached here has quite a few different restrictions, one of them being completion of the water line relocation prior to the building permit. Is that the intention of that number 2?
Yes, would be happy to consider any alternative forms of wording for that condition. I suppose I wanted to keep it general enough so to make sure that the North Coast County Water District got whatever concessions, whatever they needed, but our intent was, and the applicants and owner is fully on board with this. You want to make sure that that pipeline is located in the correct place for the water district and that there is an easement before you start construction of this project. So I'm sure they would fully support. But that was my intent with that condition. And happy
Is-
to reword it if that would help.
Is it possible to reference the letter?
Sure.
Well, I think we could reference the letter, or we could actually just take the language right out of the letter, one or the other.
Okay.
I mean, the way it is stated in the letter is the relocation of the section of the pipeline will require an easement or agreement between the district and the Garcias. Prior to the building permit issuance, the district requires that the pipeline be relocated to the satisfaction of the district, as well as new easements granted for the newly installed pipeline. Take that exact language and.
And then the following sentence, due to this location of the proposed pipeline, the pipeline must be relocated
Yep.
before construction of the house begins.
We could drop that language right into the condition.
Okay.
Commissioner Niblin.
Thank you. I just had one other follow-up question regarding the guest parking. Are there particular constraints on where that guest parking can be on the parcel itself? I mean, it seemed there was quite a bit of concern about placing it on the driveway. I'm just sort of curious about what other options would exist to meet that requirement.
I believe it has to be within either 100 or 150 feet of the location of the dwelling.
I see. But that's the extent of the
Right, that's correct.
limit. Thank you.
Commissioner Cooper.
I have an additional question. I did not see very many grading plans in here, and it did mention some heights of some retaining walls to be constructed with this project. Is there any concern on the staff as far as the height of those retaining walls and where they would go behind the house?
The project was reviewed by the building department, and I believe the applicant has an engineer here available tonight that can answer those questions, but there was no concerns that I'm aware of that were raised regarding the retaining walls. And just to clarify, when I brought the issue of the retaining walls up, it had to do if certain areas were widened, that would increase the height of those retaining walls, and that was of concern to the applicant. Can I also clarify, excuse me? To go back to a previous question, it's actually 100 feet. The parking spaces have to be within 100 feet, the guest parking spaces of the dwelling. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no more questions.
I have one more question.
I apologize, I didn't realize I was interrupting.
No.
Please.
The other question I have as far as the easements concerned for the North Coast County Water District was if they were to put those guest parking spaces over that easement, is that an issue?
That's correct. What I would do is double check with the if the applicant doesn't.
Okay.
There was an issue, according to the applicant, I did not get confirmation from the water district, but if we had those parking spaces up closer to the dwelling, there was concern that that it might impact the water line. But again, there is room further down along the driveway to put those parking spaces.
And then the final question I had was on item number 4. It talks about some landscaping for some visual areas. What happens if they do not maintain that landscaping where you suggest the landscaping to be put?
Thank you for bringing that up. I'm glad I meant to mention that as well, that put in screening landscaping below the house. There is a condition of approval and as part of that condition of approval regarding landscaping, it states that it must be maintained. And if it's not maintained, we do have code enforcement, so we can contact the property owner, see if we can get compliance. Then if not, there's code enforcement that can follow up.
I think the basic answer to that question is we actually have continuing
Yes.
authority over the site via the use permit and the site development permit to make sure that the landscape stays in good order.
Also in good order, and I would also suggest that the landscaping be something that's a little less fire hazard than the eucalyptus that we currently have everywhere. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Vedalas.
Question about the lot line and the street line. There's a large gap between the street and the lot line. Is that the city street that extended that distance?
One moment here. Actually, there's an extension of Corona Drive. And then at that angled darker line, that's where the property line starts. So a portion of, where the hammerhead exists now, there's another portion of the driveway that would be extended across Corona Drive, which is public right-of-way, an improved street. And then there's a portion of the driveway that would be actually on private property. So it does go from Corona Drive to the private property, direct.
Commissioner Cooper.
I think that was an excellent question. Who maintains that area from the end of that hammerhead to the private property? And whose property is that?
It is part of the city right-of-way. Corona Drive extends to that location. My understanding is it would be the property owner that would have to maintain that because they're extending that area to get access to their property.
Is that
The city isn't taking on the costs of improving that area, even though it's in public right-of-way.
My concern would be for any runoff into Corona and the maintenance of that particular street, and it'd be great if we could put that as a condition to approval as
I
well.
think we should do is clarify that it's really, even though it's in a public right-of-way, it's going to be designed to the standard of a
Right.
private street and will be maintained like a private street. The city will not accept that as part of the public street.
So is that a paved area then?
That is,
Yeah.
it will be paved, yes.
Right. And engineering will be reviewing and approving. I believe there's a storm drain that's existing that was put in for the property at 674 Corona. I have talked to the applicant's engineer about that as well.
I have a question about that. If that's an extension of a public street, and if at some point the city decided to extend that street, are there any constraints put on what the applicant can do now with respect to a private road that would prevent precluding the city from coming in later?
Well, I mean, from a practical standpoint, the city could only extend to the property line right now, so it'd be a very short stretch of Corona that they would be improving.
Right.
But I suppose theoretically, no, there wouldn't be. It's a city right-of-way, but the city right-of-way ends at that property line.
Okay, thank you.
And just to further clarify, I believe this is the only property that would take access from that location, so it's not as if there'll be another property behind it that would need to access Corona Drive at that point.
Good additional point. Thank you very much. Commissioner Cooper.
Sorry. One more question. Thanks. It looks like on C402, that section is simply a stabilized construction, which is really just a cobble over a geotextile fabric. And I'd be concerned about dragging that stuff all over the public right-of-way for that particular street.
That is something that is reviewed by the building department and engineering, it's on right-of-way. Yeah, so a particular portion, the portion on the right-of-way will be something that's reviewed by engineering, and actually our expert is in the engineering department. Ray Dungeness is our person that is supposed to help review these sorts of, to make sure that the stormwater, rainwater doesn't wash things out, make sure it's done properly and meets all the requirements. But we do have special inspections that are conducted by our building inspectors, say for the portion that's on private property, and engineering will review the portion that's on the public right-of-way.
So back to my maintenance question again. I'm sorry if I wasn't listening attentively enough, but then who maintains that public right-of-way?
It'll be the applicant. The applicant owner will be responsible for maintaining it, for building it and maintaining it.
I mean, typically I see that in a provision or something. I don't see
Well, I think typically it's handled through the encroachment permit process. And if you notice, there's a
Number
condition
18.
number 18, talks about city right-of-way constructed per city standards. And typically there would be some agreement on how those improvements, would be built as part of the encroachment permit process.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question on this, on the private road, well, it has down dirt road. I see it's just drawn in. Is that owned by anybody or like the water company or any, it didn't, in the text, it really didn't say one way or the other.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that last part of the question. I understand the dirt road you're referring to, and what was the last part of that question?
Is it owned by anybody, or in the text, it really didn't detail that, it just said that it was an access back to an area that's kind of gotten out of hand?
I did have conversations with the applicant owner about that. There is a dirt road that exists, and it's across as you can tell by the plan on C6.01, the last page, it is partly across 674's property, the adjacent property. Apparently, that dirt road's been in existence a number of years. It wasn't put in by the applicant. What they're putting in, as you can tell, is clearly on their private property. So why that road was put in, I can't answer that. It just has been there a number of years, and it won't be providing access to the property for this project.
And it serves no purpose that we can see for detail, I mean,
Right, it's on the adjacent property, and, right.
thank you.
Yeah, I didn't ask.
Seeing no further questions from the commission at this point, I'd like to ask the applicant to come up. You have 10 minutes to speak regarding this project.
Hello. I'm Michelle. This is Dave, my husband. Dave grew up here in Pacifica, and we recently moved back 4 years ago. And we purchased the property, and it's taken us this long to pull together our vision of a dream house, and here we are. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Commissioner Cooper.
I have a question in regards to the retaining walls that you're proposing on the project, as far as how high they would be and what do they look like?
The height is, we're trying to keep to a 6-foot fence height. That's what the whole parking variance is about, to try and keep the wall height at a controllable elevation. There'll probably need to be a soldier pile wall, because there'll still need to be access to get to that water line later, because there'll be an easement. So it probably won't be concrete. It'll probably be, is that it's accessible for the water line later. So whatever it will be, it'll all match.
So just a soldier pile wall with lagging and a wood lagging type of thing?
Yeah. I mean, we're not really, I think it shows concrete, but I think we still need to have access for the water. That's why it might be in that, at least in the center section, it would need to be a soldier pile.
What are your thoughts on if we required you to put in the extra 2 parking spaces? Have you had any thoughts on how you would do that?
Well, everybody wants more space.
You can also give me your comments as well, since you're on.
We got a little out of order here. We were thinking that we'd speak for 10 minutes and then do the questions, and I was going to speak about the variance. The intent of the variance is we're just trying to respect the hillside preservation. If you really want the parking spots, we'll put them in. All the retaining walls are drawn on that plan, and they are shown, and I can point them out if anybody wants assistance. There's 2 6-foot walls, and the more we dig, the bigger the walls are going to be, and we're just trying to respect hillside preservation, which says to try to work with the topography that's there, minimize retaining walls, and that was the point of it. It seems silly that every home in Pacifica is 2 parking spots and hillside preservation is 4. I still don't understand the intent of that, even after listening to staff just now. But if you guys think it's an important thing to put in, we're for it. We just wanted to protect the hillside, that was the point.
Commissioner Evans.
Thank you, Chair. Question on the driveway, and I commend you on your plans. They look very nice and fit into the hill with minimal disturbance. Thank you. I have a concern, though, about, okay, you come in the evening, you park your car in the garage, you leave the next day. How do you turn around?
There'll still be 2 spaces in front of the garage. I mean,
it'll be big enough to turn the car around, so you don't have to back all the way out?
That's what we're saying, is it's already 20 feet wide, even with the 2 more parking spaces would make that wall that high, 15 feet. So that's why we're trying to steer clear of.
I was just concerned because I know with the standard driveway of 20-foot wide driveway, it's a pickup or truck, something like that. You can't really turn that around in that distance very easily. I see Dave coming back up here.
Again, it was all just to respect the hillside. We definitely, we could go bigger. We can do bigger walls and do more, but it's a compromise. And if you notice that on this 8-acre lot, the house is as close as Corona with respecting the neighbors without being right on top of them. We stayed as close as we can. And with the topography of this lot, those are the special conditions where it is a balancing act of taking care of the hill, not making walls that everybody's going to see from a distance. And I think they would enjoy a bigger, wider, and well, like I said, we're just trying to respect hillside. So it feels like we're going the wrong direction. We were trying to please you guys, and we feel like we're almost getting chastised for it.
Sometimes it works out that way, too.
Yeah, but we're
Sorry.
flexible. We'd like to hear what you have to say.
Well, like I said, my only concern was, first thing in the morning, I certainly wouldn't want to back out of that driveway, and I can't see any other way of doing it. Now, I'm not as concerned about the 2 extra spaces, because everybody parks in front of the garage. But maybe if you incorporated the 2 together, you could work out a little turnaround just past there and still get your 2 spaces when you're not turning around, so.
A little wider right at the garage door, just so you could, yeah.
Right.
It's just, when you look at it, it's hard to see flat on the paper, but it goes up so, 10 feet wider makes it so much taller. But yeah, right by the garage, I would rather have 10 off-street parking places, but it just, then it starts looking too far the other way.
My wife drives a Prius, she could turn around, I couldn't. But, so yeah, that was just a thought on my end, was maybe to incorporate the 2 together, you could get a turnaround and a couple parking spaces on the outside, satisfy the hillside prevention, and also a little more safety in turning around. So just my thoughts on that. Thank you.
Commissioner Niblin.
Oh, thank you. I think my question was answered.
Great. Commissioner Vadelos.
Like next to the garage, there's a 10-foot wide space. On one side is a deck, which I can tell is on the slope, but is this 10-foot wide space a flat space next to the garage?
You mean where the front door is?
No,
Well,
the other side.
The side where the front door is, the front of the building?
Which drawing are you on?
Facing the ocean?
Opposite side.
Any space?
There's no north, south, east, and west on it.
Chesapeake.
A2 on A2.
You want me to take a look?
This is of the wall.
She's talking about east of the garage, which has a hill sloping down towards the garage.
Dave, you got to speak into the microphone, please. Oh, sorry, Dave. Blackman.
A lot of Daves.
Sue was just speaking about on the east side of the garage, away from, if that could be cut out. And so that is a large hillside right there, and it could be cut out. And again, from people hiking up above, we're just trying to minimize the impact. I'm pretty excited that you guys are suggesting do more, and if you're saying that you'd like to give us that ability to widen it right there and make it a little safer, and that was okay with you, we can work that out with staff. That'd be great.
Commissioner Evans.
I guess this is more for staff. Do you see any problems with, I know you were the one that wanted to get the 2 extra spaces. Do you see any more problems with widening right there just past the garage? I know it's right over where the transmission line was supposed to be, but if everybody works with everybody.
Well, I think all we could say to that is, we'd work with the applicant to try to minimize the grading and retaining walls as much as possible and still conform to the code. And I think the statement about wanting the spaces or not wanting the spaces, that really wasn't where we started with. The standard is for 2 extra spaces. Right. And we looked at the legal findings that are necessary to support a variance. We didn't see how we could make those findings. On the other hand, if the commission feels differently about making those findings, it's your prerogative to do so. So again, I think we have a lot of flexibility here in how we could approach this, but I think we certainly could work with the applicant to get the spaces and hopefully minimize any impact.
Well, I don't want to dig into the hill anymore because I live on a steep hill. I understand that and have some walls, but
Is a solution to accept it or give us the variance and give us a little flexibility to make it a little bit wider to turn around, and with the intent that 2 cars would park in front of the garage as the owners think what's going to happen. And we would not do officially 2 parking spots because that really is going to take a big chunk out of that hill. But to do what you just suggested, allow the parking in front of the garage, as most people do, and just make it a little wider and a little safer. You guys would accommodate that. That would be great for the applicant and everybody. And I've spoke with North Coast. They're really receptive, real helpful. They just want no structures over their easement, but they're
Right.
fine with parking.
That was what I was figuring, that, you know, they can tear up driveway real easy, so. But I guess it's still back to staff was, if something like that were to be put in there, would that fit into the extra 2 spaces?
Yeah, I think all we're really looking for is some level of compliance with the standard, which is the 2 extra spaces.
Right.
Right. Didn't say anything about what size, whether they be compact, or
Right,
whether they have to be together or
Right.
separate. I mean, I think there's a lot of possibilities there.
How do you feel about a tunnel? No, never mind.
Well, I've got a question.
Gordon?
Yeah, so Dave, the the big Dave. When you compare Chuck's proposal versus the other options that the city was talking about, in terms of the disruption to the hillside, in terms of visibility and whatnot, how do they compare?
Well, the city standards for 2 parallel parking spots is pretty large. I mean, it would be, if I remember, it's like 10 feet by 40 feet to do 2 cars. So if we're just talking about widening a little bit right there at the driveway, just to make it a safer place to turn around, the owners would love it, North Coast would be fine with it, sounds like staff's good with it. And so that sounds great for us. Is that what your question was?
Yeah, and with that,
I'm only talking about maybe going 4 feet instead of a whole width of a car. Just to give them 24 feet to turn around would be just great.
and in terms of accommodating the extra parking?
Well, again, the standard isn't for, parallel spaces or anything else. The standard is just for 2 spaces within 100 feet of the house. That's it. I think the suggestion was for parallel spaces because it seemed logical that you could do it that way. I think we just want to, meet the red face test, really, can this accommodate 2 spaces, and can you still use the garage at the same time?
Right. And does it sound like that would do it, or do you need?
I mean, I'm willing to try to make that work, certainly.
Okay, I mean, my interest is in,
I think we're saying 2 different things. If you want 2 parking spots that are going to allow 2 cars to come in and out of the garage simultaneously, we're going to tear that hill up. We're willing to do it if that's what it takes to get this project done. I see no point in it. Most homes don't need to do that, and the intent of the hillside is to protect it. So I'll listen to you guys. You guys know where we want, and
so what you're talking about,
would not allow the 2 cars in the garage to leave without those 2 guests being there.
So it sounds like we would need a variance to do what y'all are talking about.
That's what I'm asking for, and it's not for selfish reasons, but we will do exactly what you suggest to do. If it means dig that hill back.
and to be more specific, what the ideal from your perspective is to extend the width of the driveway by?
I'm suggesting maybe only 4 feet, just for a small distance to turn around. I mean, I really want to minimize the impact of that hillside, but we already have 2 6-foot retaining walls to make this driveway acceptable. We start getting into 18 feet, 19 feet, that doesn't seem like to be honoring the hillside preservation. Again, if that's what's needed, we can widen this hill to make that happen.
And so widening it by 4 feet, would that allow additional, that doesn't sound like that's allowing additional parking. It's just allowing the owners to turn around.
What Chuck just said, and what most people do in Pacifica, there's very few hillside preservation homes in Pacifica. Just about everybody has guests, parks 2 cars in their driveway. If they even keep their garage clean, can put 2 cars in their garage. So in most homes everywhere across Pacifica, 2 off-street parking is sufficient, and here we are in hillside preservation with a hillside trying to protect it, and we're doubling the parking requirements, and we don't even know why we're trying to do this.
But I understand why it makes, it does make sense because the lot is considerably larger if you go from the point of the public street where let's say, for example, the guys have a party or something like that, and there's a lot of people, it's going to be from a planning perspective, it's not a great thing to have all of your friends be parking, 250, 300 feet away.
This road is 20 feet wide that's proposed. It's pretty wide. You can put an 8-foot wide car, still have 12 feet of width. This is wider than most streets in Pedro Point with incredible congestion. I have a house on Olympian that our cars are piled everywhere and you can barely even get a UPS truck through. This is miles past what they have. And so you could, in a party situation, park along the driveway, park down at Corona if so needed. And, but like I said, we're happy with whatever direction we go. And
This seems to me to be a classic reason to ask for a variance. You've got two competing objectives. One is preserve the hillside because it's a hillside preservation zone, and the other one is provide the two off-street parking. So I think it's a classic trade-off.
Well, I guess one of the questions would be whether or not the commission would entertain a motion that a special circumstance exists here insofar as not granting the variance might tend to cut contrary to what we're trying to accomplish with respect to the zoning.
Yeah, I just want to comment, and you have a very large driveway. I don't think what we're asking for is that you design to a particular plan that's 40 feet wide by 12 feet wide and add that dimension to your property. I think what we're suggesting to you is that we don't necessarily need to issue a variance if you're able to fit two parking spaces within a driveway by allotting additional space to the director's purview. I mean, it does not like we're sitting here saying you need to chop another 12 by 40 feet out. What we're saying is that you have to make some accommodations to add two parking spaces to your piece of property. Your interpretation, I think, is what's getting everybody here, and at least my understanding of what's getting everybody here. We're not saying that, hey, you know what, we understand you have a 25-foot driveway. I don't think we're saying you need to add another 12 feet. Another by 12 by 40 feet.
what are you suggesting if it's not 12 and if it's not 4? Help me out.
Well, I think that's up to interpretation as far as the variance for the planning director or whatever. When you need to submit something, it seems to me that this is kind of a molding type of requirement. It doesn't necessarily need to be what you're thinking it needs to be. And I just would urge the planning commission also to do that reference. There is no set standard. It's not, I need you to add 12 feet to it. That's not what we're saying.
Okay, but what are you really proposing in width then, that we would, that's what we're...
Well, I think that would be up to the planning director as far as exactly what dimensions it would be. I think that there is a purpose for that increased width, and I do agree that there is a reason for that stipulation within the thing. I wouldn't want to see you get in a wreck or bash your car up into a wall trying to turn it around. That's just not, that's not appropriate, nor would I like to see, everybody having to walk your driveway.
Keep them healthy with the walk, though.
Well, we did say that we're happy with 20 feet up to 32 feet. I mean, it's up to you guys what you're going to allow us to do, so we'll leave it for you guys to deliberate.
Commissioner Evans?
Thank you, Chair. I guess it falls back to staff.
Yeah.
What would be your minimum width to suffice not having a variance?
That parking space is 9 by 19, 9 feet wide by 19 feet.
So you'd have to have that.
But again, that's a standard for the interior dimensions of a garage. I think you have to think about this. If the parallel sort of parking design is what transpires, and again, that was just a suggestion, not a requirement.
Right.
If you use the street out in front here as a standard, there's little as 6 feet wide.
Right.
Obviously, they need to be long enough to accommodate a car, but I think they could probably be as narrow as 6 feet.
But with a 25 or 20-foot driveway, what is that requirement? I mean, obviously, we don't need another 14 feet of parking space.
I don't know that the 20-foot wide driveway was a requirement of the city either. It might be. Again, I don't see anything in the conditions from fire that says they wanted 20, but maybe there were some discussions offline about that. I'm not sure. Because the standard width of a driveway isn't 20 feet necessarily. So I think there's
So what is the standard width of a driveway?
12 feet usually.
I guess...
Up to the point where you reach the two-car garage, obviously, where it has to be wider.
I guess all I was trying to find out, I state that I'm more concerned about the turnaround than the parking, because, I mean, as Dave put it, to comply with the hillside protection, you have to dig deeper.
Well,
So
again,
you're doing the opposite of what it was designed for, just because it says, I need 2 more spaces. I understand that, but again, I'm more concerned with the turnaround rather than the parking issue.
Right, and, and I don't disagree with the sort of contradiction that exists, in the development standards. And if you're interested in the turnaround, that it could be a separate thing. I mean, if you believe you can make the variance findings to support not having those spaces, yet still want a turnaround, that too is something that the commission has the authority to do.
So I guess I have a theoretical question. If I had a 25-foot driveway and I outlined 2 spaces on that driveway, would I meet the requirement?
Yeah, if it met the test that we just talked about, which is, can you get in and out of those spaces? Do they appear to be, theoretical parking spaces?
Thank you.
Not to say that you'd use them necessarily, just like the speaker said, we have garages all over town that aren't used for parking.
So you could have 2 notional parking spaces. Again, I want to just make sure I'm clear on this. You could have 2 notional, so to speak, parking spaces that are sort of drawn on paper, as long as like fire truck can get by in the amount of width
again,
it needs to get by.
We have to reflect on the fact it is a 20-foot wide driveway already.
No, I got that.
Right.
So,
Right, so we have a 20-foot wide driveway. And
he's got his hand up.
And the minimum is a nominal driveway is a 12-foot wide.
I think
Right.
the applicant may have some additional information.
It sounds like we just answered the question. If we're only going to need 12 feet of driveway, and we have 8 for parking, that accommodates it. If we don't put it in front of the house so the cars can get out, that's wonderful. The fire department said they would like to get within 150 feet of that project, which leaves us a huge amount of room. This is what we're proposing, but maybe there's just some miscommunication with staff that we needed on and beyond that. We're welcome. That's what we're saying. We're going to park on the driveway. You got 12 feet to get by. It sounds like we've all solved this problem, and we just draw out 2 spots on the driveway that don't exist in front of the garage door, and we're done.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm netting out.
Sounds good to me.
Maybe 15 more minutes to discuss it.
Oh my gosh, and you're 15 minutes over. Any other questions for the applicant or any closing comments would you like to make?
So, this is not for you guys. Well, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mike.
I just wanted to clarify a few of the questions I heard come up that may or may not have gotten resolved. So regarding the water line and the condition, I think that Dave and Michelle agree with me, that condition should read that the water line needs to be relocated prior to construction of the house, not issuance of the building permit. The typical construction phasing on a project like this is going to be to make your rough grade, cut the driveway in, then relocate the water line, install the rest of your utilities, pave the driveway, and then at that time you're working on the house. So I didn't want the issuance of the building permit to hold them up on installing the driveway and the rest of the improvements while we're waiting for the water line. Is that?
Well, I think that's why the condition that we wrote was a little vague to begin with, which is to give some wiggle room for the district and staff and the applicant to work to get to where we need to get to. Obviously, we're dealing with another agency. It's not under the power of the city, so.
Does that mean we don't need a building permit to do the water line? Or am I...
Again, I don't know if we would be issuing a permit for that water line or not. But again, we're just keying in on the water district ladder itself. And we read that earlier, what that said. So again, I'm willing to leave the conditional language the way it is, which is a little more general and a little vaguer in terms of what that process is. It just says approval from the water district.
Right.
And, we are okay with that concept. It's our job, obviously, in the post-approval stage to make sure that these things happen. So.
I'm sorry, I forget exactly what the condition reads. Is it?
Well,
it's.
I like just to read the agreement. It says, prior to the building permit issuance, the district
Right, so we can't
requires-
do the rest of the work. We can't do the driveway and the rest of the utilities without a building permit. And so I'm a little nervous that if the building permit depends on moving the water line, then we're not really being all that efficient with the construction.
Well, just to be clarified, the condition that we wrote says, number 2, the applicant shall obtain approval of the water transmission pipeline realignment and associated easement from NCCWD prior to the building permit issuance. It says approval, not necessarily the actual relocation. But if you read the letter, and we read this earlier in the proceeding tonight, it says, and this is what Commissioner Cooper was referring to, it said, prior to the building permit issuance, the district requires that the pipeline be relocated to the satisfaction of the district, as well as new easements granted for the newly installed pipeline. This is their language. So, again,
I guess,
Right, I don't think that the water district is concerned about when your building permit's issued. They just, I think what they're trying to say, the intent of that is, don't start building the house until you move the water line out of the way.
I guess I have a fundamental question for staff, is that typically in a public utility, the public utility is the one that contracts to modify or relocate this pipe and this water line. That would include sanitation and everything else. So is this part of the building, the contractor doing this, or is North Coast doing their own relocation?
That is not clear, actually, to us. I don't know, maybe you've had, conversations with the water.
I think that the water district may give you the option of doing it yourself with your own contractor or having them do it.
Yes, they're not going to do it.
Yeah, no, they actually told me on the phone, I talked to Chris myself, and he said that it was up to us to find a contractor, get the quote. They will oversee the work, they'll make sure it's done right, but we actually have to hire the contractor to move the pipeline.
And they design the relocation in-house.
So again, I think the bottom line is we're open to suggestion, given the sort of terminology that we're dealing with from the water district and our own usual terminology. So if anybody has any ideas about how to make this clear and workable, we're more than happy to consider.
I guess I would be concerned from the water district standpoint of issuing a permit for an entire house construction and having that permit closed out before their water line is back in service. That doesn't seem to make sense to me. It seems like they would want a separate permit to relocate the water line. They'd want to close out that permit, accept it, and then they would want to issue a building permit for the private residence.
I have less concern about that. I mean, we could issue the permit, and closing it out is something that we have control over anyway. I mean, we have the ability to flag properties and make sure that they're not closed out until other agencies are satisfied. And I'm sure that the applicant would want the same thing, given that the water line's running through their property.
Yeah, and the district's letter kind of contradicts itself. It looks like it says, prior to building permit issuance, the pipeline should be relocated. And at the end of the letter, it says the pipeline must be relocated before construction of the house begins. Right. So I think the intent is that before you build the new house, you need to move the water line, which makes sense because it's in the way.
I think that the language in the conditions is sufficient as is, given the point just raised. And it meets the requirement, and you also have control over the closing of the permit to make sure that the other agency is covered, so.
Well, and we can pledge to work with the water district to make sure that they're satisfied. I mean, that's really, I think, the key to all of this, is to make sure they're satisfied. And whether
there's
it's
already
before
good-
issuance or at the same time of issuance or after issuance, I assume if they're satisfied, it really doesn't matter.
And it looks like there's already really good dialogue between all parties, so.
Can I jump in one more thing? I remembered I did pass that, my recommended condition of approval. I did send it to Chris Ragnart, who, the gentleman that they're talking to at the North Coast County Water District, and he was okay with it.
Great, thank you.
So I just remembered.
So is there any chance that the letter they wrote constitutes approval of relocating the line? I mean,
That's not.
I think the water district would have to confirm that.
That's not what we decide.
But possibly.
Okay. Great, well, thank you very much.
well, I can answer a few more of the questions unless they don't matter.
Are there more, or
Please go ahead if you have.
let's
So
just
you,
roll with it.
Commissioner Cooper, had a question about the stabilized construction entrance on C4.02. That's just used during construction to prevent the trucks and other vehicles coming in and out of the site from tracking debris onto Corona Drive. It's not a permanent improvement. The finished driveway will be paved like the street.
Oh, okay. That helps out a lot, thank you.
And then regarding the question about whether it's a privately maintained public street, I do think there are other projects that have been done where similar improvements were made within the public right-of-way, but there was basically a maintenance agreement. That's something that Public Works should draw up. I should point out that there is one other property adjacent to Corona that could potentially be developed in the future. So I think having the agreement is best for the applicant and the city. However, we would need to provide flexibility to let that get amended in the future if that adjacent site gets developed and wants to also use the driveway. I think there's a question about the retaining walls. I can't recall exactly what's in the geotechnical report, but typically on these hillside lots, we provide like a 2-foot tall debris wall behind, so the retaining wall would come up a couple feet out of grade just to catch things that slough down the hill. So I think the retaining walls along the back of the house were pretty short. They were only 4 or 5 feet, but we'll probably have to bring that concrete up out of the ground another 2 feet to satisfy the geotechnical requirements.
Thank you. I'm actually, I wasn't quite following you on the flexibility regarding the driveway and someone else potentially wanting to build off of that driveway. Is that covered by what we have here in front of us? Or is that something in addition that you would like?
I think the point was there's just a right-of-way there conceivably could be accessed by another property. So it's covered.
It's covered.
I mean, they may have to improve that area in a different way if they decide to do
Yeah,
that.
there is another property owner, so as soon as you get onto that first little bit of the right-of-way, he would make a right and go up the hill, so the first like 20 feet
Yeah.
is still kind of would be the another person's access into their property.
Got it.
So there's probably, say, 50 feet, 25 of it would be like shared between me and another
Got
property
it.
owner, and then just 25 of it would be, the part that I would be solely using.
Great, great. Okay, thank you. Commissioner Vadelas.
I just had one more question that staff brought up, and it was about the neighbors and the noise and the motorcycles. So if you could elaborate on that.
I actually, today I went up there and someone had put plants or bushes and stuff around, and as I walked into the back, realized that some kids had a whole day up there. They had their lunch and they put everything in the garbage can, which is good for surprising, but I found out who it was. Until I'm living there full time, it's almost just uncontrollable. There's too much open land. They have 20 exits to get in and out. They can come from Fassler, they can come from the top of the hill. Controlling the foot traffic and the bicycles and the motorcycles right now is, I think it might be a little more under control when I'm there, because then I can, just more people around, and then once the project on top of the hill begins, it's going to squeeze that more under control. But yeah, it's been a, it runs amok, but I don't know what else you can do other than post a police officer at the end of each one of those dead-end streets. I mean, I think the neighbors are tired of it too. Today must have been a really good one, because when I got home, like I said, there was like barriers of bushes built up where the kids have been riding in and out. They just go over the top of it. So I don't know really how to.
Okay.
We're trying to get it under
That
control.
wasn't your issue, that's a
It's
trespassing issue.
bicycles, foot traffic. You got 3 generations of people that assume that's all open space to the walk-on, to even just trying to, the paintballers, actually, that was actually one of the best-known places in the Bay Area to paintball. And the trash was just unbelievable when I first bought it. But yeah, other than being there, it's too hard to control it unless, I don't know any other way. We've slowed it down immensely, but I don't think we've eliminated it completely.
And the commission may be interested to know that the adjacent project that was referenced, which is the Harmony at 1 subdivision, actually will be underway soon. So I think that access to that property, at least that part of it, will be limited as a result.
Great. Okay, one more time. Are we all done? Questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
At this point, if I'm correct, it's time for anybody from the audience who would like to speak on this project. Time is limited to 3 minutes. I have 2 cards up here, and I ask for anybody else who wants to speak to submit a card just so that we have your contact information on hand. Ann Houston, do you want to speak on this agenda item? Okay, come on up. You have 3 minutes.
If you could speak into the microphone. You can pull it down, actually. You can pull it down.
Okay, my main concern, that there are others, but they're in the letter that unfortunately, I apologize, I didn't think to make copies of for you. But the one thing I'd like to elaborate on is the motorcycle noise. And Mr. Garcia says that The motorcycle noise is something he has no control of. It started shortly after he put the fence that goes part of the way around on, installed that fence. Somebody, I guess Mr. Garcia is saying it wasn't him, built a dirt bike track. It comes pretty close to the back of my property. Just at the beginning of that time, right now there doesn't seem to be a lot of noise. But at first there was a lot of noise. Now, it'd probably be nice for Mr. Garcia to explain to us what's going on here. Also, the other problem with having his property, which seems to be open for motorcyclists, if people hear that noise, I had kids that now decided, oh, well, I hear the noise, then that must be, I'm cool. And so they started to do what they used to do, which is to go onto the school grounds and kind of go around, tear that up. And the police used to try to stop them, but of course they just went up over the hill where the police couldn't go. So that's one of my big concerns. They also probably should not depend on the blackberries and the poison oak to keep people off their property. Not all of it, of the part that is close to my house, has been fenced, so they might think of doing that too to keep people off the property. But I really would like to hear about the motorcycle noise and the motorcycle use of the property. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Ann. Why don't we hear from Lyle Ackerman? Are you're here to speak about this agenda item as well? Great.
My name is Lyle Ackerman. I live down on the end of Alta Vista, which is a street below Corona. And I've looked at these plans and I've noticed that the sewer and the utilities drop down along the hill and come out into Alta Vista. And if that was to happen, it's going to change the scenery there at the end of Alta Vista. And it's going to be a nuisance for the people living on that street. I don't see why they just can't run this from the new home along Corona, especially now hearing that there's another piece of property that's going to be developed there. And it's also a concern of a couple of my neighbors.
Great. Thank you. Would the applicant care to address those two questions?
I don't know the exact location of the first speaker's property. I don't know if it's the motorcycles. Okay, because there's a few things. So there's a large motocross track that was built on the top of the hill where the houses are going to go on the top that has attracted a lot of excitement for the last couple of years. Actually, since when I bought it is about when they brought a D9 tractor off a Fassler and built it. So that, I believe, is where the noise originally started. From growing up in Pacifica, the kids have ridden on top of that hill, maybe probably even including me as a kid. But yeah, to control that, I'm sure some of the building is going to squelch that ability to have all those exits and entrances for the sound issues.
Do you plan to allow motorcycles on your property?
No. I mean, on my personal part, somebody
Yes.
else riding on there, no.
Okay.
And then how about the
easement coming down to,
sewage and the,
yeah, so it's a downhill run down to the lower street. I think it's more tree cutting is the issue was what people are trying to avoid, which I won't be taking any tree. I think there's a couple of fruit trees that were planted on the easement, but I'm pretty sure if you looked up easement, you can plant stuff on there, but if there is something that eventually has to come through, it might have to be moved or gotten rid of. But as to each side of that easement, no. there was 2 or 3 very large trees removed on the side of the hill above the easement 6 months ago. If that didn't affect any viewing or changing, I can't see a couple of the smaller trees affecting much. I mean, we're talking shrubs and small trees, if anything, down that easement.
So looking at the drainage, I'm not a sanitary engineer, but it looks like it slopes down your driveway right into Corona. So why was that not a good location?
It doesn't, it slopes down to the bottom, and then there's a turn that goes back up to the street. So there's actually a low point at the middle of that distance. So where you get to the city right away, it's actually a low point. It would just be less filling of dirt on that area that's probably, that's unstable.
We had initially explored that option of taking the sewer to Corona, and it was by recommendation from the sewer department that we actually changed that design.
Okay.
So we're trying to work with kind of the utilities, the shortest distance. There's a storm drain near the end of Corona, so we're tying into that. The sewer in the joint trench going to Alta Vista seemed to make the most sense. And then our water line is just going to come off of the relocated transmission line.
Yeah, I have a question. On drawing C301, it has the proposed sewer line. Is that down where it says lot 25, lot 26, you have going between those, is that existing lines under those lots?
No, I think what you're referring to is where the proposed sewer line goes through the existing easements. There's 2 easements there, I think a 5 and a 10-foot wide easement.
Okay, that was what I was wondering about. So there are already existing easements there?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Just not existing lines?
Correct.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, I think that's...
One more question. This is a closing of the loop question. Just because, while we have the applicants still up there, in terms of getting back to the driveway, it sounds like where we all came out was that there is no need for a variance because the driveway being 20 feet, there's already room for the spaces, so that what Dave, you were saying is that you can simply draw in some parking spaces?
That was my interpretation of the solution that we all came up with that should work fine, so there is no need for a variance if that satisfies the staff's parking requirements.
They're conferring. So, staff, what do you think?
What we're discussing here is, and again, maybe Dave has the answer to this question, but as I said earlier, there's no specific fire comments or conditions, that we have reflected here, and if that 20-foot wide driveway was a requirement of the fire district, then it's a slightly different situation. Do we know?
Yes, we do. They wanted a fire access road within 150 feet of the project. That's what they need to be. That's as close as they need to be. Closer is greater. So 150 feet is about the property line of Corona and that. So as long as we don't start putting parking spots that we block so they can't get within 150 feet, it won't be an issue with the fire department.
It was a 20 feet clear they needed, though?
Correct, but they don't, so we have the clean zone. You said not in front of the driveways, and so what the fire department wants is they need to get within 150 feet. So that gives us a place to park, say 20 feet from the garages, no further 150 from the house. And it sounded like city staff wanted it within 100 feet anyway, so it seemed like we all came up with a pretty good solution of parking on the side.
It sounds like theoretically this can work, but again, we'll have to check in with all the different folks who have an interest.
Work without a variance, just to be clear.
Yep.
Okay,
But so to be clear, I want to make sure I understood this. The fire department doesn't actually require that they be able to get adjacent to the structure. Within 150 feet of the structure is all they need.
Within 150 feet of the structure is the fire code.
Right.
Great. Commissioner Evans?
Thank you. I hate to bring up sour apples. I'm still concerned about the turnaround. Have we taken that off
Just buy small cars, please.
Just buy small cars, yeah, no. And I will go in agreement with my co-commissioners, but I want to understand for certain if we've left it at the 20-foot mark or if we pulled it out to 4 feet or whatever.
Well, I think that might be a good point to bring it back to the commission and.
Can I answer that, Chuck?
Sure.
It seems like 4 feet is within the preview of the administrators to allow. So if you're saying it's okay that it's a little bit wider to help the homeowners turn around, and everybody's fine with that, I think the staff and I can work that out, if it's that minor of such a thing.
I'm happy, well, I would be happy with 4 feet. I keep thinking trying to turn around at 20 feet.
Okay, well, if staff is happy.
I'm sorry about being anal on this.
No, that's fine, but if you're saying staff has the ability to work that out directly with us, that small amount, that seems like
I seem to be getting a nod over there.
Again, if you would like to encourage that, but not necessarily require it, and we'll work it out, that's fine
Okay.
with us.
That sounds great with me.
I'll go with that, so.
Great.
I think it sounds good.
Voila.
Thank you. So let's bring this back to the commission at this point. Thank you, everyone, for your comments and concerns and questions and answers. Would anyone like to speak from the commission regarding this project? Commissioner Evans.
I'll go ahead and start and not bring up the 4 feet. I'm in favor of the project. I like the design, and honestly, I think it's a fit in with the area very nicely. And I used to be on the Open Space Committee, and we always looked at hillside preservation. So I think it's a great idea. I just want to make sure everybody's safe in doing the driveways and all that. So I guess we don't need the variance, then is what I'm taking it. So I'm fine with that too. So.
Thank you. Commissioner Evans.
No, that was me.
Oh, excuse me, Gordon.
So, question for staff. So if we were to move to approve the plan, but without the variance, do we need to address the variance? Or do we need to expressly deny it?
I would, from a legal standpoint, I would say you probably need to take an action on the variance, and if it's not needed, then denying it would probably be a no harm, no foul sort of situation.
Got it.
So that would be my recommendation. Leaving it open means it's never going to be acted upon.
Okay.
So.
All right. So I'm ready to make a motion unless there's more comments from commissioners.
I'd just like to say I understand, the trade-offs that you were making, and I appreciate you thinking those through and working with everyone on them. That's what it's all about. There's good goals in the Hillside Preservation District, and there's good goals required here, and I think you've done a good job of threading the needle and coming up with a great project, so thank you. I am ready for a motion if you are, if anyone wants to make one.
Okay. I am going to move that the Planning Commission find that the project is exempt from SEQA, approve use permit UP-034-14, and site development permit PSD-787-14 by adopting the attached resolutions for the proposed single-family dwelling at 650 Corona Drive, including conditions of approval in Exhibit A, and incorporate all maps and testimony into the record by reference, and move that the Planning Commission deny variance PV-511-14 by adopting the attached resolution.
Is there a second, Commissioner? We'll go with Commissioner Evans.
Thank you, Chair. I'll second that motion.
All right, let's take that to a vote. And that passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Next item on the agenda.
Second, right? Yeah.
There are no other agenda items, so now we're into the communications section. Commission communications, is there anything that my fellow commissioners would like to state for the record? Okay, none. Staff communications.
I did want to call the commission's attention to one item. As you know, it's been a while since we've had a minutes clerk attending the planning commission hearings, and due to some budget constraints, we no longer even have the ability to have the minutes clerk prepare expanded minutes in the future. So from this point onward, and with this meeting, this will be the first time you'll see these, you will get what's called action minutes, and that meets the legal requirement, but it will only specify what the actions of the commission were on any particular item. So at the beginning with the next set of minutes, that's what you will be seeing.
Thank you for actively managing your budget. Very well. Oral communications. This portion of the agenda is available to the public to address the Planning Commission on any issue within the subject matter jurisdiction of the commission that is not on the agenda. The time allowed for any speaker will be 3 minutes. Is there anyone who would like to? I see something. Yes, thank you. Yeah, that'd be great.
Everybody, I'm Martin Anaya. I'm the Executive Director of Pacifica Community TV and Pacific Coast TV. So some of the commissioners I know well, and some of them haven't seen the faces before just because I don't always come in on planning. But if you need to make another, you don't necessarily need to make another CD. I wasn't sure what you were planning to do for this last question that you just had, but certainly we can make a DVD available for you so you can see in here too. So that's all I had no intent to speak, but when I heard that last item, I just thought I'd bring that up for you.
Thank you. Well, great. Thank you very much.
To fill this out.
Please. That'd be great, just to have a record. Very well. I think we've made it through the agenda. Commissioner Gordon.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second. There's a second. Let's take it to
I'm
vote.
sorry, who was that second?
Commissioner Niblin?
Draw straws.
I kept my mouth shut.
Everyone ready? Let's vote.
Sorry.
Somebody want to stay?
Oh, there you go. Yeah, I'm Campbell.
Great, that passes unanimously. This meeting is adjourned. Anyone aggrieved by the action of the Planning Commission has 10 calendar days to appeal the decision in writing to the City Council. If any of the above items are challenged in court, issues which may be raised, are limited to those raised at the public hearing or in written correspondence delivered to the city at or prior to the public hearing. Judicial review of any city administrative decision may be had only if a petition is filed with the court not later than the 90th day following the date upon which the decision becomes final. Judicial review of environmental determinations may be subject to a shorter time period for litigation, in certain cases 30 days following the date of final decision. Thank you, everyone.
Great. Thanks. Good stuff.